Heartbreak hits hardest when whispered in crowded rooms. Bradley leaned close, dripping venom, calling her a fat embarrassment. Chloe shattered. She didn't realize Chicago's most ruthless kingpin overheard every cruel syllable. Blood would soon spill because nobody disrespects his future queen. Vengeance wears a bespoke charcoal suit. Chloe Henderson adjusted the sweeping emerald green fabric of her evening gown, trying to ignore the prickling sensation of 100 judgmental eyes. The annual Chicago Heritage Charity Gala was a playground for the city's elite, a glittering sea of champagne, diamonds, and razor-thin socialites. Chloe had never fit into this world. She was a woman of substance, possessing lush, generous curves that defied the rigid size zero expectations of high society. Usually, she carried her weight with quiet confidence, wrapping her body in tailored fabrics that celebrated her shape. But tonight that confidence felt paper-thin. She had only come because her public relations firm mandated her attendance. It was supposed to be a straightforward evening of networking. That was before she spotted Bradley. Bradley Hayes, her ex-fiancé, the man who had spent 3 years meticulously dismantling her self-esteem before finally leaving her for a Pilates instructor named Jessica. Chloe tried to pivot toward the exit, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs, but Bradley had already locked onto her. He detached himself from a group of wealthy hedge fund managers and intercepted her near the towering ice sculpture. "Chloe," Bradley said, his voice carrying that familiar, condescending lilt. His eyes raked over her body, not with appreciation but with cold, clinical disdain. "I didn't expect to see you here. I thought this event had a certain standard." "Hello, Bradley," Chloe replied, keeping her voice incredibly level despite the sudden shaking in her hands. "I'm working. Excuse me." He stepped into her path, leaning in close so only she could hear him over the string quartet playing in the background. "Did you really think squeezing into that much silk would hide anything? You've gotten bigger. You're still just as fat. It's honestly embarrassing to even be seen near you." The words felt like a physical strike. They were the exact, venomous echoes of every cruel argument they had ever had behind closed doors, now dragged out into the glittering light of the ballroom. A suffocating heat rushed to Chloe's cheeks. She didn't offer a witty retort. She didn't slap him. The sheer humiliating reality of his cruelty simply paralyzed her. Without a word, Chloe turned and fled. She pushed past a group of laughing socialites, practically running toward the heavy oak doors that led to the venue's historic library. She slipped inside, shutting out the noise of the gala, plunging herself into the quiet sanctuary of leather-bound books and heavy velvet drapes. The library was dark, illuminated only by the faint golden glow of the streetlights filtering through the massive windows. Chloe collapsed into a high-backed leather chair, her composure finally breaking. A choked sob escaped her throat. She wrapped her arms around her stomach, suddenly hyper-aware of every curve, every softness that Bradley so violently despised. "Tears are a terrible waste of beautiful eyes." The voice emerged from the deepest shadows of the room. It was a rich, gravelly baritone, thick with a subtle, unplaceable accent. Chloe gasped. Jumping out of her chair, she peered into the gloom, her heart in her throat. Sitting by the unlit fireplace, previously obscured by the wing-back chair, was a man. As he leaned forward, the dim light caught his features. He was breathtakingly intimidating. He wore a masterfully tailored charcoal suit that strained across broad, muscular shoulders. His jawline looked as though it had been chiseled from granite, and his eyes, dark, predatory, and fiercely intelligent, were locked onto her. I'm so sorry," Chloe stammered, hurriedly wiping her cheeks and smearing her mascara. "I thought this room was empty. I didn't mean to intrude." "You aren't intruding," the man said smoothly, rising to his feet. He moved with the terrifying silent grace of an apex predator. "But you are crying. Why?" It was the sheer authority in his tone that broke down her remaining defenses. He didn't ask it like a polite stranger. He demanded it like a king accustomed to absolute truth. "It's nothing," Chloe whispered, looking down at her emerald dress, suddenly feeling foolish. "Just a bad encounter." The man took a slow step closer. "People do not weep in dark rooms over nothing. Who put that look on your face?" Chloe sniffled, a bitter, self-deprecating laugh escaping her. She felt so small, so utterly broken, that the truth just spilled out of her into the quiet darkness. "My ex," she whispered, her voice cracking. "My ex called me fat." Silence stretched between them. It wasn't an awkward silence, but a heavy, dangerous one. The man stopped moving. His dark eyes swept over her, taking in the full, magnificent slope of her hips, the narrowness of her waist, the generous swell of her chest straining beautifully against the silk. When he looked back up into her eyes, the air in the room felt 20 degrees hotter. "Your ex," the man said, his voice dropping to a low, lethal purr, "is a blind, utterly stupid man. You are not fat, Mirabella. You are a goddess. You are lush and soft and perfect." Chloe's breath hitched. No one had ever spoken to her like that. The absolute certainty in his voice sent a shiver racing down her spine. He didn't think so," she murmured. "He is a peasant who wouldn't know what to do with a queen if she handed him her crown," the man replied, stepping directly into her personal space. He reached out, his large, calloused hand gently catching a stray tear on her cheek. His touch was shockingly warm. "Give me his name." "Why?" Chloe asked, mesmerized by the intensity radiating from him. "Because a man who speaks to a woman like you in such a manner needs to be educated," he stated simply. "What is his name?" "Bradley," she breathed out, completely hypnotized. "Bradley Hayes." The man's eyes flashed with something dark and violent, a brief flicker of a raging inferno. "Bradley Hayes. I will remember that. And what is your name, beautiful girl?" "Chloe." "Chloe Henderson." Chloe. He tested the name on his tongue, making it sound like a dark promise. "I am Matteo Vitiello." The name hit Chloe like a freight train. The haze of attraction instantly shattered, replaced by a spike of pure adrenaline. Matteo Vitiello. He wasn't just a wealthy socialite. He was the whispered ghost story of Chicago. The undisputed head of the Vitiello crime family, a mafia boss whose reach extended into every bank, every union, and every dark alley in the Midwest. He was a man who destroyed empires before breakfast, and she had just complained to him about her ex-boyfriend. "You." Chloe took a sudden step back, her eyes widening in sheer panic. "You're Matteo Vitiello." "I am," Matteo confirmed, his expression entirely unreadable. He didn't offer apologies or explanations for his reputation. He simply watched her, assessing her reaction. "I have to go," Chloe stammered, gathering the skirts of her heavy emerald gown. "I shouldn't be here. I'm sorry." Before she could take another step, Matteo's hand shot out, wrapping gently but firmly around her wrist. He didn't hurt her, but the grip was an immovable anchor. "You are not running away, Chloe," Matteo said softly. "Not from me, and certainly not from him. You are going to walk back into that ballroom, and you are going to hold your head high." "Ow, I can't," she whispered, tears threatening to spill again. He will do nothing," Matteo interrupted, his voice laced with cold, absolute authority. "Because you are walking back in there with me." Chloe stared at him, bewildered. Why would the most feared man in Chicago care about a PR executive's wounded pride? But looking into his dark eyes, she saw no pity. She saw an intense, possessive fury that made her stomach flutter in a way that terrified her. Matteo offered his arm. "Shall we?" Slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs. Chloe slid her arm through his. The muscle beneath his bespoke suit felt like solid iron. When Matteo Vitiello pushed open the heavy oak doors and stepped back into the glittering light of the ballroom, the effect was instantaneous. It was as if a great white shark had glided into a pool of brightly colored tropical fish. The laughter near the doorway died abruptly. Conversation sputtered out. Eyes widened. The crowd physically parted, stepping back to create a wide, respectful path for the Mafia kingpin. And on his arm, standing tall despite her shaking knees, was Chloe. She felt the weight of 100 stares, but this time there was no judgment about her size. There was only shock, awe, and a healthy dose of fear. Women who had sneered at her mere moments ago were now staring at the floor, too terrified to meet Matteo's gaze. Matteo walked at a deliberate, agonizingly slow pace. He was making a statement. He was claiming her presence, wrapping her in his terrifying aura of invincibility. Chloe felt a strange, intoxicating rush of power. Beside this man, she wasn't the fat, discarded ex-fiancé. She was untouchable. Matteo's dark eyes scanned the room with predatory precision until they locked onto their target. Bradley Hayes was standing near the grand piano, holding a glass of scotch, laughing with Jessica. Matteo altered their course, steering Chloe directly toward them. As they approached, Bradley casually glanced over. His smug smile instantly vanished. The color drained from his face so rapidly he looked as though he might pass out. Bradley worked in high-stakes corporate wealth management. He knew exactly who controlled the shadow money in Chicago. He knew Matteo Vitiello's face, and he knew the rumors of the blood on his hands. Mr. Hayes, Matteo purred as he stopped smoothly in front of the trembling man. Mr. Vitiello, Bradley choked out, practically dropping his glass of scotch. He didn't even look at Chloe. His terrified gaze was entirely fixed on the mob boss. It is an honor. I didn't know you were attending tonight. I find charity events to be quite educational, Matteo replied, his voice a smooth, deadly drawl. He casually adjusted his cuffs. For instance, tonight I learned that some men in this city lack basic manners. They lack respect. Bradley swallowed hard, sweat suddenly beading on his forehead. I am not sure I understand, sir. Matteo finally turned his head, looking down at Chloe with an expression so tender it made several onlookers gasp in shock. Then his gaze snapped back to Bradley, turning colder than the Chicago winter. I was having a quiet moment in the library, Matteo said softly, the quiet volume forcing Bradley to lean in closer, trapping him, when I found this breathtaking woman weeping in the dark. She told me a rather disturbing story about a cowardly little man who insulted her, a man who called her names. Jessica, Bradley's new fiancée, let out a tiny, frightened squeak and took a step back, desperately trying to distance herself from the impending blast radius. Sir, Bradley stammered, his eyes darting to Chloe in absolute horror. The realization of what he had done and who she was now standing with crashed over him. It was just a misunderstanding, a bad joke. A joke? Matteo tilted his head. I don't hear anyone laughing, Bradley. Do you? No, sir. No, sir. Chloe is under my protection tonight, Matteo stated, his voice echoing clearly in the sudden dead silence of the ballroom. Anyone who disrespects her disrespects me. And you know what happens to men who disrespect me, don't you, Bradley? Bradley was trembling violently now. Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Chloe, I am so sorry. I didn't mean it. Matteo leaned in, dropping his voice to a whisper meant only for Bradley's ears, though Chloe heard every terrifying word. Apologies are just wind. I prefer consequences. Enjoy the rest of your evening, Mr. Hayes. It will be the last peaceful one you ever have, Matteo straightened up, his face an emotionless mask. He offered Chloe a faint, reassuring smile. I believe we've had enough of this party, Mia Bella. Allow me to escort you home. Chloe could only nod, her mind spinning wildly. Matteo guided her toward the main exit, leaving a completely broken, hyperventilating Bradley behind them. The silence in the room held until the grand doors closed firmly behind them. Once they were in the cool night air, stepping toward Matteo's waiting armored black